All right, Brent Porcio, TopVelocity.net. You can do a 3x pitch BioMetrics here of Eric Jenkins. All right, we're going to take him out of his leg lift, starting right before leg drive. We can see hip position. It's left-handed pitcher here. So if we look at the yellow check, the femur, drive leg femur, is in a neutral position, which is fine, but we don't see a lot of abduction if we look at the check in the light blue. Only 17 degrees. We'd like to see before leg drive, or actually in this case is rotation, you can see that there'd be more abduction, probably around 20 degrees. 45 would be ideal. So that knee needs to stay out and that hip needs to keep moving forward and down. You can see the trunk is really leaning forward, so we don't want to be leaning too far forward because it could also put more of our weight into our quad. That could cause us to also want to collapse drive leg early. You can see the hips are even starting to rotate open at this point. We should have some counter rotation in the hips. So if I look at, let's see, the hip movements graph. Actually, that's not the right graph. Let's see, pelvis. You can see the hip is at 4 degrees of rotation. I'd like to see it like a minus 10, ideally. So coming out of leg lift, back, that leg is staying internal, not abducting, so that hip's starting to rotate. Front foot is even open. So rotating already occurring, and the trunk is leaning over towards the feet, which would cause that to want to happen. Then the arm's trying to swing back really hard. If we watch as we go into front foot strike, the leg continues to turn down, the foot even stays in contact with the ground. I mean, there's no extension. So if we looked at the ankle extension here, we can see the dorsiflexion, that's the yellow mark, is at 5. So there should be extension here, and going into plantar flexion in front foot. You can see because of that, front side's landing closed, which is good. The shoulders are staying closed, which is good, but the hips aren't really rotating. So going into front foot strike here, you don't have a lot of hip rotation. Therefore, when we look at the kinematic sequence, how each segment of the chain is sequencing, we can see going into front foot strike here, we're still waiting for all the peaks to occur, and we're actually getting the trunk peak to go first. We want the trunk peak to go after the hip peak. The trunk peaks, the green dot, we want the red dot to be there first, and then we want the trunk and glove side to go off. So we're not getting good hip to shoulder separation. Even if I bring in the hip line, shoulder line, we can look at the top view. There's really no hip to shoulder separation here. So collapsing back leg really is what it is, not allowing the hips to really drive open quick enough to create some separation between the two. You can see the hip is in a stable position, which is good. So we can see the side bend is to 3 degrees basically laterally. So we can see that drive hip is not dropping. That's good. So he's holding stability. And guys who rotate, they can hold stability in the hips. So there's good hip stability. There's a lot of contralateral tilt. You can see at front foot strike here, the trunk is 14 degrees contralateral, and then as it goes to pitch release, 32 degrees. So it's getting excessive. The trunk's pulling basically off too hard to the glove side. So if I bring in the drawing tool, it's going too far this way. And mainly when you don't have a lot of hip rotation or back leg drive, driving back hip through, then you don't have a lot of linear energy. So the trunk wants to pull off towards the glove side, kind of creating a lot of rotational energy. So there's a lot of rotational energy here going off, and you can see even at the point here, literally going into pitch release, the trunk is, if we look at the green check, the trunk is still loaded back in extension 8 degrees. High velocity pitchers are going to be in a forward bend position at 40 degrees. So you can see back leg collapsing, everything rotating together and not getting any really trunk dynamics or any sagittal or linear dynamics. You can see the front leg isn't even able to drive and extend in that movement because everything's just spinning and rotating. The arm's abducting. I'd say it might be a little bit low. You can see the elbow's a little low. We want the elbow to be at the shoulder line, which that can put a lot of stress on the elbow. As far as health issues here, this is the shoulder line. That elbow needs to be above or at or above that shoulder line. So this is going to be putting a lot of torque on the elbow, and also being very rotational. It tries to speed up the arm very quickly, which puts a lot of stress on the arm as well. So I mean, the good things are, the stride line is landing closed on front foot, shoulders are closed. We just don't have any power behind the hips, and that's what's killing all the linear energy. So we don't have enough force here coming out of the ground to drive this around, which would then throw this trunk forward, and we get rid of all that over rotation going into pitch release. We look at the linear speeds. The linear speeds, the hips peaking at a 4.6, and you see the trunk is right after at about a 6.7. So if we had a lot of linear speed, we'd see a 10, a 15 in the trunk speeds going forward. So there's probably a decent amount of rotational speeds if we do the kinematic sequence rotationally. The trunk speeds are hitting 8, 5, 7. And that's actually slow, but so yeah, I mean, you can see even rotationally the trunk speeds aren't that slow. Aren't that fast. So the goal is to try to, once again, go back to getting more linear power. Basically load the hips longer, get more abduction in the drive hip, get some drive, not just rotation, some drive to drive the hips out of the shoulders to get more separation, and they get that trunk launching forward. That's going to be healthier on the arm. That's going to be potentially a big increase in velocity too. So